Hello everyone, this is Ricardo with Firepole Marine. Today we're here to discuss the installation of the Marinetown Sunshade socket using the Firepole Marine Retrofit Kit. We're going to talk about and show you all the steps that you're going to need to know in order to install the required backing plate behind the sunshade socket, underneath the fiberglass, underneath the gunnel, without having to drill any additional access holes. But before we get started, let's go over some of the tools that you're going to need in order to install the sunshade socket. First, you're going to need a drill. It doesn't have to be a battery drill. It could be an electric drill. I do all of my installations mobile most of the time, so I prefer to use a battery drill because I don't have an electrical power source. If you're doing your installation at home and all you have is an electric drill will work just fine as long as it has enough torque to be able to drill the 1.125" hole that you're going to need in order to install the sunshade socket. So you're going to need a drill, whether it's battery or electric, it doesn't matter, whatever you choose. And you're going to need an 1.125" hole saw to make the 1.125" hole for the sunshade socket. You're going to need also a pencil to help you mark all of your drill points. You're going to need masking tape. Masking tape protects the fiberglass from cracking, from flaking. I highly recommend you tape over the area that you're going to be drilling in order to protect the fiberglass. Drill bit. I recommend for this application for using the Firepole Marine Retrofit Kit 5/16" drill bit. The reason why the drill bit has to be this size is because you want to be able to line up the nuts that are on the modified backing plate from underneath in those holes. And if the holes are too small, you're going to have a hard time lining up these holes in those really tiny holes. So you have to drill a 5/16 hole in order for these nuts to be able to fit snugly inside the holes that you drill. So 5/16 drill bit, Loctite. You're going to have to apply some Loctite either on the screws or inside the nuts when you're doing your final installation of your nuts. This will keep the nuts from backing out during vibration or whether you're underway. You always want to use some Loctite. A protractor. This is a digital protractor that I use. You don't have to use a digital protractor. You don't have to go out and buy one. If you have a carpenter square, some sort of a compass, anything that you have that will give you that 45-degree angle that you're going to need once you install the Marinetown socket. So you have to install the socket at a 45-degree angle. So you're going to need something to be able to measure that 45-degree angle. Another tool that I use, it's optional, it's not required. I like to use a small pair of needle nose pliers or vice grips. This will allow me to free up my hands while I'm installing the sunshade socket, and I'm using these 6-inch threaded rods to be able to get the backing plate lined up. I go ahead and I clamp this off. That way I'm able to clamp it and let it go without fear of losing my backing plate down into the wall, and it also frees up my hands. So those are the tools that you're going to need in order to install the sunshade socket and the backing plate using the Firepole Marine Retrofit Kit. So now let's get started. Let's dive into all the steps and processes and procedures that you're going to need to know in order to install this socket and the backing plate using the Firepole Marine Retrofit Kit. Now that you've determined the location of where you're going to be installing your sunshade socket, and you've prepped your area with the masking tape or painter's tape. You've also prepped all of your tools and staged all of your tools nearby. Now you're ready to drill your hole and begin your install. Before you begin the install, I highly recommend that you verify your bow flare. Make sure that you're drilling the hole far enough in the center of the gunnel so that you're not drilling into the bow flare. Very important. Again, make sure that you're drilling far enough in. Double check that bow flare so you're not drilling straight through and creating a hole on the backside. After you've drilled your 1.125" hole with your hole saw, this is where the compass comes into play. This is where I acquire my 45-degree angle. When I marked the position for the sunshade socket hole, I created a baseline. I don't know if you can see it in the video here, but there's a pencil line right here. That is my baseline. The baseline goes all the way across the hole. It should be right in the center of your hole. I line up my protractor, center of the hole, on the baseline, and that's where I mark my 45-degree angle. Now that you've got your 1 1/8" hole drilled and you've got your 45-degree angle line marked on your tape, you can try to put in your sunshade socket, but because you haven't drilled the 15-degree angle yet, it's not going to fit flush. Now we take our drill, line it up with the 45-degree, and we're going to come in at a slight angle to bevel the hole. Once we get the hole beveled at a 15-degree angle, now your sunshade socket should fit flush. If it doesn't fit exactly flush the first time, give it a couple more shots. And now the sunshade socket fits flat. We want to line up the top hole with our 45-degree pencil mark, and now we want to mark our screw holes. Our top hole should be lined up with the 45-degree angle pencil mark, and now we've got our additional screw holes marked and ready for drilling. Now that you've got those 3 holes drilled, now you can remove the masking tape, or painter's tape in this case. Before we install the sunshade socket, there's a little tip that I want to share with you. In my experience, when you install a sunshade socket directly on the fiberglass, over time you could develop spider cracks. What I found is by using a countersink bit and beveling down the holes just a bit, not a lot, this will help avoid creating spider cracks. Now, will the spider cracks still develop? Possibly, but by beveling down the holes with the countersink bit, it will help over time with the spider cracks. Not too much, just to give it a little bevel so that the sunshade socket isn't sitting directly on the fiberglass. I'm using a 1/2" countersink bit. That's the size that I've chosen. It worked out well. Works out well for the 5/16 holes. Again, 1/2" countersink bit. Now we're ready to install the sunshade socket backing plate using the Firepole Marine Retrofit Kit. The kit comes with a backing plate that's been modified with stainless steel nuts. The kit also comes with 2 6-inch 1032 threaded rods. You want to thread your rod into the backing plate, just enough so that you can see the bottom of it, just to make sure you got enough of the rod coming through so you don't drop the backing plate in the wall or in the hole. Okay? You don't want to also use the center hole. You want to use one of the 2 outside holes, and you'll see why in a moment when we install this inside the hole. So once you've got it threaded, either on this side or that side, now we can drop it down into the hole carefully. Now, using your other hand, you want to line up this top nut with this top hole. Okay, once you can visualize it, once you can visualize the nut is lined up through the top, now you're going to take your other threaded rod and thread it down into the backing plate. Make sure that you get it threaded nicely all the way through, that it's not cross-threaded. I can actually visualize through the 1.1/8 hole that the threaded rod has already come out the bottom, which is great. That way I know that it's all the way through and it's threaded correctly. Now, at this point, I want to hold on to this rod and unscrew this one. Now it's time to line up the other holes with the other nuts. Using your finger, the nuts actually fit pretty good inside the 5/16 holes that you drilled. Okay, once you visualize that they're lined up, now you can take your sunshade socket, slide it down. This is the tricky part. You can't let this rod go, okay? Hold on to the rod, slide the sunshade socket all the way down till it fits flush. I can still visualize my threaded nuts through the holes. Now at this point, I use my handy dandy vice grips. Place the vice grips on the threaded nut. Now I can let it go and my hands are free to be able to work with the 1032 by 1.5" flathead screws and apply the thread locker. I use the red Loctite. I like to apply some Loctite into the hole. I also apply some Loctite to the bottom of the screw. I use an electric screwdriver to get it started. Now you don't want to tighten this up super tight. Just get it threaded, just get it started. If you tighten up your screws too tight, you're going to have a very hard time removing the threaded rod. Once you get these two screws in, this one has to be removed. But again, if you tighten them down too tight, this is going to be too tight and it's going to be very difficult for you to take that threaded rod out. Same thing with the other hole. Some Loctite down in there. Makes its way down into the nut. Put some on the end of the screw. You don't want to get a lot of Loctite all over the customer's boat, even though it will wipe off. It still could be challenging if you get it on the customer's boat. Okay, so now I've got two screws in. You can safely remove the vice grips, confidently knowing that the two screws that you put in are holding the backing plate. Now you're going to unscrew this last threaded rod. Apply some Loctite down into the hole, just like we did with the others. Again, you don't want to get a lot of Loctite over on your customers, or on your boat, not your customers, but on your fiberglass. You can easily wipe it off, but it's just easier and cleaner for you not to have to do all that excess cleaning after the fact. Put some on your bolt, your screw. Again, these are 1032 by 1.5" flathead screws. Now, you guys are seeing me using an electric screwdriver. I use an electric screwdriver just to get them started, but I do not tighten these screws with a drill or any sort of power tool. You only want to tighten the screws with a Phillips head screwdriver. Tighten them by hand. You are going to hear sometimes some crackling, some crunching noises coming from the fiberglass. That's normal. The backing plate is putting pressure from the bottom up, compressing and squeezing the fiberglass. If your fiberglass is hollow, has honeycomb in the center, or is foam filled, you're going to hear a lot of creaking and crackling. That's normal. Again, it's just the fiberglass compressing from underneath. You want to get these things as tight as you can, rotating from one screw to the other. As you tighten one screw, the other one loosens up because the backing plate is compressing from underneath. It's normal for them to come a little loose as you tighten. Just keep tightening. Okay. Again, do not use any power tools, no drill guns, no impact drills. You want to do this the old-fashioned way. You don't want to put extra torque on these 1032 screws that can damage the backing plate, ruin the threads, and then you'd have to start all over again with a new backing plate. Just tighten them up by hand. You can wipe off the excess thread lock. And now your sunshade socket is completely installed, ready for use. Firepole Marine, folks. Visit us on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. If you need any help during your installation, we'll be glad to do a video chat. You can schedule that ahead of time and let us know. We'll be more than happy to talk you through the installation if we need to. Drop us a line. You can call us or text us at 407-986-0893. Email is firepolemarine@gmail.com. Firepole Marine, built by firefighters, made to last. We've got you covered.